Bozoma Saint John, The Urgent Life. My story of love, loss, and survival. Bozoma Saint John has experienced loss more than many people. She lost her life in her birthplace of Ghana when her mother fled to Kenya to escape political persecution after her father was arrested. Then Kenya was replaced by the United States, as her family sought asylum and made a life for themselves in Connecticut. In the process, Saint John lost a sense of being at home, of belonging. As a Black woman growing up in America, she was never made to feel that she truly belonged. Even more painful than losing these geographic places were the people that Saint John has lost over the course of her life. Her first boyfriend in college, Ben, died by suicide, a particularly difficult loss, as Saint John has been burdened by the feeling that she could have prevented it. Then her first daughter, Eve, died when she was born prematurely. And years later, Saint John's husband, Peter, died of cancer. These losses have been incredible blows. They have left scars that Saint John realizes will never heal. Instead, they are scars that she will have to live with for the rest of her life. But the key word in that sentence is live. Saint John's story isn't only about loss. It's about how to live through loss, with loss, and to come out on the other side even more alive. In fact, it's about not taking 1 second of this life we have for granted. It's about living urgently, because tomorrow might not come. So close your laptop, mute your phone, and take some time to listen to Bozoma Saint John's lessons from the urgent life. It might take 15 minutes of your time, but it's worth so much more than that. Lesson number 1. Pick up that phone. One night during college, Bozoma heard the shrill ring of her phone just as she was leaving her apartment. She knew who it was. Ben, her college boyfriend, had been spiraling. He was plagued by jealous delusions in which he imagined she was going out with other people. He was filled with self-loathing and despair, and nothing Bozoma did was enough to talk him out of that misery. That night, she wasn't up to having another painful conversation in which she defended herself about the supposed crime she'd never committed. In fact, she was going out to have dinner with some girlfriends because she needed some support herself. So she ignored the ringing phone, picked up her handbag, and walked out the door. That moment was one that stays burned in her brain. Because Ben took his own life that night, jumping off a bridge near his apartment in Toronto. With years of distance and therapy, Saint John understands intellectually that there's nothing she could have done to prevent his death, that his suicide was not her responsibility. But still, nothing can stop her from replaying that moment in her mind, from putting down her bag, picking up the phone, and having one last conversation with Ben. Ben's death is one of those losses that has created an indelible scar. Even as Saint John has left college behind her, she still carries Ben with her. And the lesson she has taken from his death is that she always picks up that phone. She doesn't wait to tell people she loves them. She doesn't hold back when expressing her emotions. She doesn't delay the trip, the hug, the celebration. She knows that there aren't always second chances. Sometimes, you get just one. Lesson number 2. Listen to your inner voice instead of other people's expectations. Bozoma Saint John's parents had big expectations for her life, and they didn't include marrying a white boy and becoming a marketing executive in New York. And yet, that is exactly what Saint John did. But she was only able to do that because she dived deep into her own intuition, and she understood that to be true to herself, she couldn't live according to other people's expectations. That may sound straightforward. However, it's anything but. As the eldest daughter in a patriarchal Ghanaian family, St. John wanted nothing more than to make her parents proud and become a doctor as they wished. After all, they had made untold sacrifices to give her the opportunity she had in the U.S. But at the same time, she could see that a life as a straight-laced medical student would never fulfill her. So when she finished college, she rebelled from their plan. She moved to New York and started her career in marketing, the career path that would ultimately allow her to truly express her talents. And later, St. John committed the ultimate act of rebellion. She moved in with her boyfriend, Peter. Not only would she be living in sin in the eyes of the church, bringing shame to her family, she would also be committing to a relationship with a man who was white and didn't share her cultural background in any way. Bozoma and Peter were reminded of these differences all through their relationship, by his family and by hers, by whispers and comments in the street. In order to be with him, Bozoma had to ignore these voices and commit to their relationship. It wasn't easy, and ultimately, those same pressures were part of what drove them apart, but it allowed her to experience great love. Lesson number 3. Live boldly. In the workplace, Bozoma has had to confront often being the only Black woman at the boardroom table. It's a reality she has faced head-on as her career took her to some of the most powerful companies in the world, moving up the ranks at Spike Lee's agency, going on to work at Pepsi, and ultimately becoming the head of marketing at Netflix and the first Black woman to be part of the C-suite at the company. Being the first is never easy. St. John has had to confront racist prejudices and defy the roles that people thought she belonged in. How has St. John weathered the looks, the stares, and daily microaggressions? She attributes it partly to inheriting her mother's steel and sense of pride. In her household, their Ghanaian identity was celebrated. Her parents never tried to assimilate to American ways, even when they were the only ones who looked like them in the whole community. Her parents transmitted a powerful lesson to their kids. Be proud of your difference. It makes you who you are. St. John also attributes her resilience to being able to trust herself and her intuitions, to being able to tune in to her internal knowledge, even when it was at odds with everyone around her. It was this voice that led her to New York to pursue a career in marketing. And when she was working as a lowly assistant in Spike Lee's agency, it was this voice that propelled her to ask him to let her read a script. That was an unbelievably audacious move for someone of her age and place in the pecking order at the agency. But she did it because her hunch told her she could. And that move was what kick-started her career. So this is the next lesson in living an urgent life. Live boldly, take chances where you see them, and don't be afraid to stick out from the crowd. Lesson number 4. Don't be afraid of making U-turns. Real life is much more complex than a neat motto or catchphrase. It's tempting to just say that you need to live according to your intuition and leave it there. But there's more to the story. Living urgently is about listening to your internal voice and acting decisively. But it's also about knowing when to change your mind again. Bozoma's relationship with her husband Peter is what brought this point home. When she first met him, she couldn't imagine sharing a life with him. As a white man, he moved through the world with so much arrogance and entitlement. She couldn't imagine him ever being able to share her experience of being in the world. When he asked her out to dinner, she responded with a dare. Read Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, she instructed, and then I'll go out with you. The book was her favorite. It captured her experience like no other. She didn't actually expect Peter to read it. In fact, she thought that was the last time she would ever see him. But to her surprise, a week later he asked her out again. As they shared dinner together, she realized that not only had he read the book, but he also really understood it. And her. She fell in love with him. Years later, their relationship had started to fray. Bozoma realized that, in spite of everything, Peter still gripped his white privilege tight like a cloak, and he didn't even realize it. The knowledge created a widening gulf between them. When the couple lost their firstborn during childbirth, that gulf only widened. Their grief felt unspeakable. And Bozoma couldn't help having feelings of blame and recrimination that Peter hadn't been able to save their child. Soon, their easy conversations dried up. Bozoma felt that she was being constricted in their marriage, playing small and tiptoeing around Peter. She became certain she needed to leave. This was the second time she heeded her inner voice. They separated, and for the next 3 years learned how to become loving co-parents to their second daughter, Lael, rather than romantic partners. And then, everything changed once again. Peter received a terminal cancer diagnosis, meaning he would only have weeks or months to live. He wrote a list of his most fervent wishes before he died, and his first request was that he and Bozoma cancel their impending divorce and get back together. Bozoma's answer was immediate. Yes, she too wanted to savor every moment together that they had left. Despite the extreme pain and stress of the situation, what followed was also a beautiful and blissful time of being together again, of falling in love again, just as they had at the beginning. Listening to your intuition doesn't mean hearing your internal voice and doggedly following those first instructions. It also means being able to listen to when those instructions change, and following them with just as much conviction, even when it appears to be a U-turn. There is no going back, only forward. The road just may have a few twists and turns along the way. Lesson number 5. An urgent life is realizing you're always already guided along the way. Bozoma Saint John may look like the epitome of a self-made woman. She arrived in New York with no connections and just a few dollars in her pocket, and ascended the ranks of some of the most formidable old boys clubs in the United States. And indeed, her life story can be read like the ultimate American idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But Saint John herself is acutely aware of how much her life has been supported and influenced by others, whether supportive angels she met during everyday life, or the spiritual presence of her God and ancestors. This awareness is what has powered her and given her the resilience to weather even the hardest situations. Let's go back to that moment when she arrived in New York. Yes, she was by herself, but she was also supported by a web of friends and well-meaning strangers. An old college friend allowed her to crash on her couch. And then a woman working in a diner became an unwitting angel and key supporter when Bozoma was close to giving up. Every day, Bozoma would walk to the payphone to call her temping agency and check if there were any jobs. She was so broke, she couldn't afford any food, so she'd go and wait in a diner between calls, sipping on a glass of water. One of the waiters took to slipping her a hot bread roll, and they struck up a friendship. The warmth and comfort of that bread roll and daily conversation kept St. John going through the bleakest days of her search for work. People like this woman are the angels who helped her make her way through the world during very tough times, who kept her hopeful and gave her the means to carry on. And more angels have followed, not least Bozoma's late husband Peter, whose presence Bozoma feels in rainbows and cloud formations and dreams, all intricate signs that Bozoma notices because she takes the time to absorb everything around her. And this is the last and perhaps even most important secret to living an urgent life. Allow loss to open you up instead of shutting you down. Allow it to open you to wonder, to kind strangers, to the joy of time spent with your child, to the patterns the clouds trace in the sky, to the urgent hum of your own inner voice, to the value of the people you love, to the value you have as a person, a flawed and perfect person walking on earth right now. So don't delay. Go and live your life urgently. In this blink to The Urgent Life by Bozoma Saint John, you've learned that you should always pick up the phone. After losing her college boyfriend, Bozoma never waits to tell people she loves them and embraces every moment. Lesson 2 is that you should always listen to your inner voice. Bozoma defied her parents by pursuing a career in marketing, but she knew it was the right thing to do. The third lesson: live boldly. Stay resilient despite challenges you face. Trust your instincts and take chances to stand out. Lesson 4: don't be afraid of U-turns. Although Bozoma and Peter separated, they got back together after his diagnosis. Be ready to change course when needed. Lastly, Lesson 5: realize you're guided along the way. Acknowledge the support you receive from others and value the people you love. Thanks so much for listening. Please leave us a rating or a comment